In this video, you'll watch me build this fully functional AI nutrition app in just 3 minutes. There's no coding experience required, and this isn't a template or a toy. It's a real working application with photo recognition, nutrition and tracking, and data visualization. However, before we get there, many people spend essentially thousands of hours learning to code the traditional way, and I was one of these people. Fresh out of university, I graduated as a programmer, and I was using Objective-C to create Mac-based applications. I was grinding through documentation, I was debugging for hours, and I was fighting with syntax errors daily. But then I discovered, or I guess now, recently I discovered the term vibe coding and all that it entails and brings with it. And this has literally changed everything. So if you are still struggling to build apps the traditional way, here's a method that lets you create sophisticated applications without drowning in syntax and debugging nightmares. And today I'm going to teach you the fundamentals, the principles, and the practical applications of vibe coding, which is this somewhat revolutionary approach that is transforming how we build software. And while I don't necessarily like the term vibe coding, I can appreciate that this has changed the way we do things, because myself included, I've built dozens of applications now in a fraction of the time that it would use to take me. So make sure to watch till the end, because I'm going to show you exactly how to build this complete AI-powered nutrition app from scratch. There will be no coding experience required, and you'll see the entire process, starting from the idea. We'll go into the prototype, and all of this will essentially happen in just a few minutes. And when you think about it, this is pretty insane. So let's first start off by defining what is vibe coding. The term vibe coding comes from Andrei Karpathy's quote. And if we look at the screen right here, in February 3rd, 2025, Andrei Karpathy here said, "There's a new kind of coding I call vibe coding, where you fully give in to the vibes, embrace exponentials, and forget that the code even exists." Again, this is my, I guess, somewhat of a problem with the term vibe coding. It's just give in to the vibes and let's see what happens, which I get. It's just it feels a bit too hippie, I guess. It's possible because the large language models are getting too good. Also, I just took to Composer with Super Whisper, so I barely even touched the keyboard. I asked for the dumbest things, like decrease the padding on the side by half, because I'm too lazy to find it. I accept all always. I don't read the diffs anymore. When I get error messages, I just copy paste them with no comments. Usually that fixes it. The code grows beyond my usual comprehension. I'd have to read through it for a while. Sometimes large language models can't fix a bug, so I just work around it or ask for random changes until it goes away. It's not too bad for a throwaway weekend project, but still quite amusing. I'm building a project or web app, but it's not really coding. I just see stuff, say stuff, run stuff, and copy paste stuff. And it mostly works. And I mean, I get this. I see stuff, I say stuff, I run stuff, and I copy paste stuff. And it mostly works. And yeah, I think that's a pretty good way of describing this thing. However, it also brings with it its own set of problems, which we'll speak about in a second. So, in a nutshell, Andrei here described the whole practice as that of building applications by essentially vibing with AI models, having a conversational back and forth where you describe what you want and the AI implements it. And if we were to think about this in the traditional versus vibe way, over here we would have the, let's say, the sad developer that is debugging, that is typing manually. All right, there's a lot of code that needs to get typed in manually. There's a lengthy, super lengthy process. However, on the right hand side, we have the vibe coder, right? Who is, let's say, happy, who is speaking or describing things in plain English. And generally, this takes less time. So if we were to compare the two, you'd say, okay, vibe is where things are at. The good thing, I guess, at this stage is that not knowing how to code could actually make you a better vibe coder, vibe developer. And I know that sounds backwards, but here's why it works. When you know too much about the technical details, you get caught up in the how instead of focusing on the what. You start thinking about implementation before you've clearly defined the problem. So if we go back here, if we take the traditional way, that is all about the how are we going to do it, right? With the vibe coding, we're like, what are we trying to do? We need, or we see something and we say, okay, let's build that. Whereas here, we're kind of boxed into the how. We need this technology, we need these tools, we need this process. So I think you can clearly see that this is sort of limiting in its own way, because here you're just focusing on what it is you're trying to build. In other words, the outcome you're trying to achieve. When it comes again to vibe coding, we're flipping the script. We're focusing on the outcome, and the AI handles the implementation details, which again, at the base level, sounds like a great thing. And if we, if I just show you what this looks like in practice, we could go to something like Lovable, and I can say, let's go to Lovable here, and I can just say, create a task management app with drag and drop functionality. And just like that, Lovable goes out and starts building my application. Now, the question is, will it be a good application? Will it work? Will it serve the purpose I'm trying to achieve? And these are all questions that we will be exploring. However, just based on that prompt, you can generate a fully working application in just seconds, which is definitely not something that could be said about the traditional way of doing it. And the great thing is that this application, once it runs, because for some reason this is just getting this right here. Let me just refresh this. Yeah, definitely 1 point less for vibe coding, but let's try this again. So create me an application with a drag and drop ability, complete with a user interface and responsive sort of interface. I mean, not the best prompt right there, but just for the sake of this demo to see what is actually, or what can actually be done. The great thing about this is that we can also have things like, I don't know, things like database integration. So we could have, things like database integration, which in this case, Lovable makes it super easy to integrate with Supabase. We could have things like user management, which I guess can fit in with the database integration. It makes it easy to change the format and change the way things look, connecting to something like Stripe. So all we need to do is just provide the Stripe API key there, and this will connect to Stripe and allow us to start charging for whatever service we are offering. So there's all that can be done right there. And in the meantime, I'll just let this do its thing right here. As you can see here, in fact, I've created a comprehensive drag and drop application with a fully responsive interface that includes key features, task board, interactive demo, responsive design, visual feedback, and rich task cards. So all in a few seconds, this Trello-looking sort of application was created. We have the ability to drag and drop stuff. We can move things back. We can add a new task, which this doesn't seem to be working. So that would be one thing we would change. And here we have an interactive drag and drop demo. So we can, I guess, show how this works. And this was just created based on one very, very bad prompt. So that is, I guess, how most people get into the whole vibe coding, when they see this and they see the appeal that, or the ability that this would allow them to do. However, why does this work now when it didn't work 2 years ago? And I think that's an important question to explore. So essentially, AI models like Claude 3.5 Sonnet, like GPT-4o, and other advanced models have gotten so sophisticated that they can now understand complex content. They can maintain consistency across multiple files, and they can also implement advanced features reliably. They can even follow design patterns and best practices, and pretty much they do that automatically. And this is why the tools of vibe coding are now that good. Now, speaking of tools, before we get into the whole principles of vibe coding, there are different tools that you might want to consider. Over here, I'm showing Lovable, but in addition to that, there are quite a few of those tools. Some of the most prominent ones are V0, there is Bolt.new, and there's also Cursor, the AI code editor. So they all do different things, they all do similar things, and I think at the end it comes down to whatever it is you're trying to build, your personal preferences, and pretty much the end outcome you have in mind. So they are all tools that you can try out and use. For it, when it comes to Cursor, this is something you download on your computer. So you download for Windows in this case, and then you run it locally. Things like Bolt, like V0, like Lovable are run on a cloud hosted version. So that is one important thing to consider as well. So in today's demo, as I said, I'm going to focus on Lovable because of the comprehensive feature sets, the intuitive interface that it offers. But I just wanted to say that each tool has its own strengths, its own weaknesses as well. So you just need to explore and find whatever works best for your specific situation and your specific workflow. Now, let's get into the 4 pillars framework because this is very important. So the 4 pillars are, let's go back here. We have the pillars of thinking, which I know it isn't something that most people want to do. Then we have structure. We have checkpoints. And we also have debugging. And these are all crucially important. So thinking, structure, checkpoints, and debugging. And you might be thinking, what is the meaning of all this and why are these important? So let's start with the first pillar, which is thinking. And think of a mind map showing clear versus unclear thinking. And the question to ask yourself at the stage is, are you struggling to turn your ideas into reality? Then in this case, coding skills aren't the problem. The problem is that you have unclear thinking. Essentially, most people just jump straight into the AI, just like I did in the previous demo, and they try to build something without defining what it is they actually want. They say things like, build me a social media app or create an e-commerce website, and then they wonder why the results are disappointing. If we look at what I built here with one prompt, it might look great, but if this isn't what I wanted, then obviously that doesn't count for anything. So what you need to do is think about what it is you want. If you are using a tool like, I don't know, X, if you are using WhatsApp, if you are using Slack, think about what it is you like about it, why it's useful, the things that make it or make you want to go back to it. And think about this. Come up with a plan. Because the hidden truth is that having unclear thinking makes your vibe coding projects fail before you even start. And the solution is, or the formal solution to this is called a product requirements document, or a PRD. So the solution here to thinking is what is known as a PRD, products required or requirements document. And if you just Google PRD, you'll get a bunch of templates. There are different ways how this is represented, but they all do the same thing. They have the same outcome. This is the roadmap, and it defines exactly what your app should do, who it's for, how it works, and what success looks like. And this becomes the foundation for everything else that you build. Without it, you're building on quicksand, and nothing really stands for a long time on quicksand. So speaking of this, let's take the traditional approach versus the vibe coding approach. In the traditional method, we might have said things like, okay, let's see what we need. We need user authentication. We might need things like research JWT versus sessions in terms of how this will be implemented. We need to implement password hashing in order to ensure this is safe. And we need to debug email verification once we set that up, right? So this is the traditional way. And this is, again, just in the initial stages. With vibe coding, we can just say, okay, what I know I need is user authentication. I also need some security best practices or to implement those. And we'll speak about security in a second. So security best practices. And I know this handwriting is going from bad to worse. And let's say we also need for user authentication. Let's say we need email verification, we need password, and a sort of remember me functionality. And this, in a way, is enough to get started. We don't need to investigate these different technologies, right? We don't need to use hashes because this will all be done by the vibe coding tool. And this is one of the main differences between the old and the new way. So what I would like you to do at this stage is to pause the video and write down your app idea in one sentence, because this is how it actually starts. This is the thinking part. And once you've paused the video and you've written your idea, I encourage you to keep watching to see how to expand into a full PRD. So let me give you a detailed example. Say you want to build an AI application which is about nutrition. So something that solves real people problems, a real solution to real people problems. What we will do is build a PRD that will discuss the concept about this AI-powered nutritional tracker that analyzes food photos. But that is actually just the beginning. We need to go deeper than that. So what I'm going to do here is show you how I would create this PRD. And I'm just going to say, I want to create a PRD that is an app where the concept is an AI-powered nutritional tracker that analyzes food pictures. The target users are health-conscious individuals that are aged between 25 and 45 who want accurate nutritional tracking without the tedium of manual input. They're busy professionals who eat out frequently and need quick, reliable data. So that would be the first part of this whole PRD. The next part would be the core features and the sort of user flow. So here I'm just going to say, for the core features, I want you to have photo-based food recognition using computer vision AI, automatic calorie and macro calculation with portion size estimation. I want daily nutritional dashboard with progress tracking and trends. I want personalized meal suggestions based on dietary goals and restrictions. And I want social sharing capabilities for accountability. So this is in terms of the core features, right? I also want to have the user flow. So I can say the flow is that number one, the user opens up the app and takes photo of a meal. Number two, the AI identifies the individual food items and estimates the portions. Number three, the app calculates the comprehensive nutritional information, such as the fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Number four, the user reviews and can adjust if needed. And then number five, we progress, we update the progress automatically in the dashboard. So as you can see, it's quite detailed. And this is the thinking part, right? I've thought about what I want before, I've made a list, and now I'm just going to create this PRD. And this is what we get. So product requirements document. And for some reason, it's a bit funky in terms of the whole output. It seems to be in Markdown, so it's not very well looking, which we can adjust in a second. What we could also include is the technical requirement. So we could also say it's a mobile first responsive design. It should integrate with food recognition AI APIs if we wanted. We could have secure authentication. So there's a bunch of other stuff that we could have. Clean Instagram looking sort of UI. So there's a lot that we can do in that sort of situation. However, this is more than enough to get started. So what I'm going to do is let me just say, can you please output this here below in Markdown? So I'll just get this hopefully a bit better looking than it is right here at the moment. And then what I will do is I will go to Lovable and I will create a new project right there. And I will grab this. So again, this, I'm expecting it to be a much better sort of first output compared to what I created before with that Trello looking sort of application. So I'll hit enter and let's see what we get here. Okay, so this is an excellent PRD. For the first version, I'll create this. Cool. I'll draw inspiration from modern health apps. Great. And this is now getting built in real time, essentially. Now, as this is getting created, you might think that this level of detail might seem excessive in a world where we're focused on vibe coding, right? So it's all about the vibes, or so that is the thing that people are spreading. You just sit down, you just start typing, and this thing magically appears out of thin air. But I think doing the thinking that is needed is super important. It really matters because when you give AI this much context, it can make intelligent decisions about implementation. It can suggest improvements that you wouldn't have thought about otherwise. And it can build you exactly what you envision instead of leaving it all up to it. And you get some generic sort of template as the output. So this is still creating that right there. So let me just pause this and I'll resume the video once this is ready to be previewed. Okay, so we just got this AI nutritional tracker, snap analyze, track your nutrition efficiently or effortlessly. Capture your meal, take a photo of your food, and let our AI analyze the nutritional content automatically. So you can upload a photo. So this is the capture screen. Let me open this up in preview mode. So for some reason though, okay, this seems to be getting cut off by the menu right there. We have the dashboard, we have the goals. There's no goals there. So this was all created based on that information that I gave to Lovable, the PRD I gave it. And I think out of the box, just based on one prompt, it looks quite good. If we were to look at this and the way it would look on a mobile phone, if I just switch to the mobile version here, we see that we get the instant analysis, AI recognition, easy upload. We have the different menus as well. So this could easily be turned into a web sort of mobile app that people can access on their phone as well. You can hit choose photo, so then you can upload stuff there. Obviously, there's a lot that you would have to do in terms of functionality as the next steps. So it probably and potentially connected to a database. You would connect it to an OpenAI key, so it can analyze the different images that people upload. But the technology is there. So it's about prompting this, about giving it whatever the next prompt might be right here, and then building up to that. In fact, over here, I even get need to save information, add user accounts, or connect with other services. Superbase is a simple way to add these features without complex technical setup. So I can just hit connect Superbase, and then I can run with that. So there's a lot of things that Lovable also makes easy in order to create. Now, let's speak about the second point that we were mentioning before, which is this right here, the structure part. What exactly is structure? So apart from this being the second pillar, understanding how applications are organized is crucial for effective vibe coding. You don't need to write the code, but you absolutely need to understand the architecture. And think about a house blueprint. When you're building a house, the architect is responsible for designing that structure, designing that blueprint. The person doesn't need to know how to install plumbing or wire or electricity, but they do need to understand that the kitchen needs access to water and power, the bathrooms need ventilation, and the foundations needed to support the entire structure. So if we think about this as we did before in terms of the traditional versus vibe or versus the modern, this is what we get. So in traditional development, I would say that the things involved in the structure would be understanding things like front end versus back end. So that's one important thing that that developers had to understand. Understanding the different components that would go into the whole project, understanding the different pages and the different views that had to be created, things like configuration files, so understanding different files that were crucial for this whole thing to run. Schemas when it comes to databases were also super important. And I'll also include API endpoints right here. So there was a lot of things that went into the whole structure and creating that to ensure that the app really, really worked. With vibe coding, it helps to know about these things, right? However, you don't need to get into the nitty gritty. You don't need to understand how to lay the pipes, how water flows through the whole house, just to keep the same analogy. It helps to understand API endpoints. If you wanted to connect to a third party sort of service. However, you can also provide the API documentation, and something like Lovable will do its thing and just connect to that API endpoint. Same thing with front end and back end, just like we saw. Lovable asked if we wanted to connect to Supabase. It created the front end. So it does a lot of those things for us. So the whole vibe coding thing really comes into action at this stage. So in practical terms, if you wanted to add a new feature to the nutritional app, understanding the structure could help you say, add a meal planning feature that integrates with the existing food database and user preference system, similar to how the current nutritional tracking connects to the dashboard or something along those lines. So you're not necessarily referencing anything specific here, but you are, or you have an understanding of how things are connected together. And that would make it easier to ensure that what you are naturally saying in English actually gets passed through and interpreted correctly by the AI. I think that is super important. Now, the third pillar we have here are checkpoints. And essentially, if you knew exactly how many developers lose works of weeks or weeks of work due to poor planning, due to not using the proper version control, you would never skip this step again. Because let me tell you about a friend of mine who is a developer. Let's call her Sarah. She's a freelance developer and she was building a client's e-commerce website. She had it all created. So she had the product catalog with search, she had the shopping cart functionality, she had payment integrations, user accounts, admin dashboard. There was a lot of stuff that had been already created. And it was Friday evening. It was like the Friday before the deadline, which was on Monday. She was adding the final touches to the whole project. And as I said, Monday morning was the scheduled deadline where she was going to give the demo of whatever she created. Out of the blue, her laptop just died. So complete hard drive failure. And just like that, I think like 3 or 4 weeks of work was just gone. And she was in a whole panic mode. She spent the whole weekend having to create everything from scratch and essentially ended up delivering something that was quite subpar. However, with proper version control, that wouldn't happen because you can use something to take care of this version control. And that is where Git comes in. So it's not an in-depth lesson into this, but it will definitely open up your mind to things that are possible and that you should be considering when vibe coding. So Git is version control on your computer. You have GitHub, which is then cloud storage for your code. And there are a few essential commands to make all this work. For example, there is git init, so for initialization. So this starts the tracking, right? You have git add, where you can select changes. Then you have the commit, where you can create save points, let's call them that. We have things like push, where you can upload to the cloud. We have things like pull, where you can obviously download updates. And I would say these 5 are the 5 most important commands to know, because with these, in combination with vibe coding, you can ensure that you are always on the version that makes the most sense, on the version that you are currently working on. So even if you were to lose your work, you would be able to pull the stuff that you had been working on. Now, this works differently on different platforms. In some cases, you might just tell the AI, commit my changes with a message describing what actually I just built. In other platforms, it might be as simple, like in Lovable, you connect to GitHub right here. And then you sync your project with GitHub. So you connect GitHub and then you can sync your project. So different projects or different tools have different ways of getting this done. But in general, all tools will have some sort of version control that you can commit to. And it is important that you understand what that process is in order to not run into the risk of losing any work. So what I would say is, just like you would hit the Control S or the Command S to save your work every few minutes, this might be something that you do within the same sort of frequency when it comes to vibe coding. Now, let's speak about the fourth pillar, which we covered right here, which was the, where are we? Debugging. And this is also a big thing. So with debugging, the reality is that things will break. It's not a question of if, but rather when. The question is how you will handle it. Traditionally, developers would have to go through line by line, read cryptic messages or cryptic error messages, hunt through the code manually, and then research solutions for hours in order to fix the things that were broken. And most of the time, when they would fix something, something else would break in its place. And this was the sort of cycle that repeated endlessly. With vibe coding, generally, and this is getting better because there were times where you would fix one thing and it would break something else. But generally, nowadays, with AI and the advancement of large language models, you can just copy the exact error. You can provide context to the AI. You implement the suggested fixes, and then you verify that the solution actually works. And generally, this works very, very well. In something like Lovable, if there's an error, you would get it right here, and it would ask you to like try and fix it. And generally, it's like a one button sort of thing. Sometimes you also get an error here, and then you can just try and fix it right there. And generally, it gets fixed within one or two different or one or two iterations. So this is the framework for debugging. So if you run into any issues, this is what I would try doing. So number one, I would describe what was expected. Number two, I would explain what actually happened. So this is sort of the expectation versus reality. Number three, I would provide error messages. So anything that you have that can help the AI understand what is actually happening should be provided right there. Number four, you can give any additional context that you have. What I would add here is any recent, I know I'm in the way here, any recent changes. So if you made any changes that broke whatever was working, this is where the context plus the recent changes would come in. And I think that is super important. And then finally, number five, I would let AI work, which is essentially hitting enter and just letting the AI do its thing. And by following these steps, you describe what happened, you describe what was expected, you provide any error messages, you give any context that might help the AI solve it, and then you let the AI work. And using this sort of five-step system, that generally seems to fix anything that is broken. Now, let's just speak about the three top mistakes that I see kill vibe coding throughout the people that I speak with, throughout my own experiences as well. And these are the three mistakes that you should definitely try to avoid. Number one is asking for too much at once. So you probably shouldn't say, build me a complete platform or build me a complete social media platform like Facebook. That's way too much. You're not providing nearly enough information, and you might end up disappointed with the output. But if instead you say, create a user profile page with photo uploading and bio editing abilities, that is much more direct, much more specific, and you can test whether those two things actually work. The second mistake is not testing incrementally. So probably you shouldn't say build for hours without checking if anything actually works, or you shouldn't actually do that. But this is what most people do. They try to create the fancy looking stuff. They build more on top of that and more and more. And then when it actually comes time to testing, they don't know what is actually working, what's not. So then They might fix one thing, but that could break other stuff. So the right way would be to test after each feature addition. If we had stuff added over here, so if we added this, we should test this, see that that works, and then we, I don't know, try and fix the goals that do not exist there yet. So we shouldn't, if we run the screen, say, let me, I don't know, this is not working. I want a menu here. Let's also, I don't know, give the users to change to a pie chart, and let's add goals, and we can have different types of, there's a limit up until where you can do that. Beyond that, things might actually start breaking. The third mistake is ignoring the AI's questions. So you shouldn't rush past when AI asks for clarification. And this goes, I think, quite well with the previous point. Sometimes the AI, instead of throwing errors or instead of creating something generic, will try and give you or ask questions to get clarification. When it does, I would suggest that you answer those questions, because providing detailed answers will get you better results. Now, let's finally speak about the MVP mindset. And I also think that this is super key when it comes to vibe coding. So MVP stands for minimum viable product. And this essentially means let's get something out there. Let's see what the market actually responds to. Let's see whether what we're creating is actually wanted by the market. And with this mindset, you can use vibe coding tools to get something out there quickly and then iterate and improve based on the feedback that you get. So these are the key elements, I would say, for the MVP sort of mindset. So the first thing is, I would say, start small. And as a result, you can avoid feature creep. So what you don't want is to have all the things that you could have in an application actually part of the application, because that is where you start with this as the original idea and then say, yeah, let me add something else. But then that leads to creating two other things. And then this breaks. So you spend time fixing it. And then you say, nah, maybe I don't need it. So then you work on this. But then this also breaks. Or you get another idea to create something else. So that just keeps going over and over again. So what I would suggest is start small, build this, ship it, which means go live with it, and then get feedback based on this. When this is working correctly, then you can think about anything and everything else that comes after that. So this is, or those are the first two things to keep in mind. The second thing I would suggest thinking about is being or having two different mindsets. And what do I mean by this? So you can be in two different mindsets at any given point. You have the implementation mode, and you have the debugging mode. In implementation mode, what you are doing is you're building new features, you're making your application that much better. Then in debugging mode, what you are only doing is fixing broken functionality. So the mindset is X isn't working, like the photo upload is failing on mobile with this error. So if we look at this, maybe this isn't working on mobile. So let's shift to debug mode and let's try and fix that on mobile. And that should be the only priority when you are wearing that hat. So here, the question to ask yourself is, am I building? Am I building or am I fixing? And that's the only question to ask. Those are the only two states that you can be in, whether it's building or fixing. And that makes things kind of slightly easier, and you're not, you're not shifting from one to the other as you are creating stuff. The future belongs to those who can think clearly about user needs, communicate effectively with AI systems, iterate quickly based on feedback, and maintain focus on outcomes rather than implementation. And those are the things that I believe will be true now and especially in the future. And when you can master the principles that we discussed in this video, such as clear thinking with PRDs, structural understanding, systematic checkpoints, efficient debugging through AI, when you can master these things, you'll build better applications, you'll build them faster than developers with sometimes decades of traditional experience, and you'll be able to see what your market actually wants, which means that you can solve real problems faster, where you focus on the user needs and you can think systematically to help solve these needs. So communicate clearly when it comes to vibe coding, iterate relentlessly, and everything else is then just implementation details that AI can handle. So my challenge to you is, now that you have this information, go build something amazing that makes people's lives genuinely better. Because I think the world needs more problem solvers, and vibe coding gives you the tools to turn your ideas into reality faster than ever before. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, check out the link in the description for more information about how I can help you. And in the meantime, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss future videos. I'll speak to you soon.